I'm so glad you could join me today. I'm really excited to read this book. I'm Auntie Franny, and we're going to be reading Beyond Ohi'a Valley by Lisa Matsumoto with paintings by Michael Faraya. And I used to read this book to my little girl when she was a lot smaller, but she's in 8th grade now, so I don't get to read to her as much. So I'm glad that I have you guys here today to share this book with me. It's one of my favorites. Let's get started. Long, long ago in Hawaii, there was a beautiful valley filled with tall ohia trees stretching as far as the eye could see. It was called Ohi'a Valley. In this valley, there was one tree that stood high above all the rest. For centuries, it provided food, shelter, and protection to the many creatures of the forest. It was known to all as the Great Ohia Tree. Hidden deep within its branches was an adventurous young tree snail named Kahuli. Unlike the other tree snails who were content to remain on the safe, strong branches of the Great Ohia Tree, Kahuli longed for adventure. Every day he would climb to the top of the tree to gaze at the vast valley below and dream. Just once, I wish I could go out there and see the world instead of being stuck in this boring old tree. One day, great clouds covered the sky and the winds swayed the great Ohia tree. Kahuli hurried up the branches, excited by the leaves rustling around him. At the top, he planted himself firmly on a leaf to keep from being blown away. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind swept his leaf high in the air. The current carried him far above the valley. He was exhilarated by the cool air rushing against his face as he soared over the ridges and valleys, surfing on the wind. He was so busy having fun, he didn't even think of how he would land. Then as quickly as the winds had come, they subsided. "Ah!" he screamed as he fell, tumbling to the ground until he landed with a thud. Luckily, he fell on a soft bed of leaves, the same leaves under which Ha'oli, the happy-faced spider, had just finished building his web. Ha'oli rushed over. "Oh no! Look at my house!" he exclaimed. "I guess your house broke my fall," Kahuli said apologetically. "And it looks like your fall broke my house," Ha'oli grumbled. "I guess I'll just have to build another one." Ha'oli looked curiously at Kahuli. "So what's a nice little tree snail like you doing in Ohi'a Valley anyway?" he asked. "I'm searching for adventure," Kahuli replied excitedly. "Adventure, huh? Well, you'll find more than enough of it here, that's for sure. But this is no place for a tree snail, so you best head straight home. Home to that boring old tree, that's the last place I want to go. But that's where you belong. Let me tell you something, kid. Don't mess around with nature. If you were put in a tree, then it's best you stay there. Here in Ohi'a Valley, we learned that the hard way. Our valley didn't always look like this, you know." "It didn't?" Kahuli asked, noticing the destroyed forest around him. "Oh no. It was once a beautiful rainforest with tall green trees and hapu'u ferns everywhere. Now, this is all that's left because creatures came here that didn't belong." "How do you know I don't belong here?" "Because there are no tree snails left in Ohi'a Valley." "Yeah, right," Kahuli said rather skeptically. "You don't believe me? Come see for yourself." Ha'oli then led Kahuli up the mountains until they finally reached Shadow Ridge. Kahuli strained his eyes to see through the mist and thick fog that rolled in. "What's here?" Kahuli asked curiously. "Not much of anything anymore, but it used to be the home of thousands of tree snails," Ha'oli replied sadly. As the fog slowly cleared, Kahuli began to see the silhouette of many shells. "Look, Ha'oli, you're wrong! The snails are still here!" Kahuli rushed toward them, eager to make new friends. But when he drew near, he was horrified to find that all that remained of the snails were the discarded shells. The ridge had become a deserted snail graveyard. Tears filled Kahuli's eyes. What happened to them? He was answered by an unfamiliar voice. "Admiring my collection, boys?" Kahuli turned to see Rosie, a huge, menacing snail slithering toward them. I thought you said there weren't any snails left in this valley, Kahuli asked fearfully as he looked upon Rosie's sinister face. I said there weren't any tree snails, Ha'oli explained. She happens to be a cannibal snail. Let's get out of here. Kahuli tried his best to hurry, with Ha'oli pushing him as hard as he could from behind. Faster, Kahuli, she's gaining on us. I'm going as fast as I can, Kahuli panted. I am a snail, you know. Well, you're going to be escargot if you don't move faster. With that thought, Kahuli pulled himself with all of his might. At last, they were leaving Rosie behind. Just when they thought they were out of danger, they found themselves blocked by an immense hollow log. Kahuli's heart dropped. There was no way around it, and Rosie was closing in on them. They were trapped. What do we do now? Kahuli asked in desperation. Don't worry, kid. She'll have to deal with me. Rosie slithered closer as Ha'oli jumped out and shouted, I'll have you know that all 8 of these legs are registered lethal weapons. Hi-ya! Suddenly, fear came into Rosie's eyes. She quickly turned to retreat. See, Ha'oli boasted, looking rather smug. Nobody messes with me. Just then, a large, dark shadow crept from behind them. Ha'oli and Kahuli slowly turned around. They were terrified as they stared into the glowing eyes of a pack of rats climbing over the log. They quickly hid themselves under the decaying leaves in the hollow, hoping to remain unnoticed. As the rats chased after Rosie, they made their escape down the ridge. Tired and out of breath, they reached a mountain stream. Whew! We're finally safe, Ha'oli said with a sigh of relief. The rats will never find us now. Just then, Kahuli heard rustling from a nearby bush. Are you sure? Positive, Ha'oli replied confidently. All of a sudden, the pack of rats leapt out from behind the bushes. Then again, I could be wrong, Ha'oli exclaimed as he searched for a place to hide. Having nowhere else to turn, they sought refuge on a fallen tree which jutted out over a rushing stream. The largest of the rats stalked them as they inched their way down the withered branch. They trembled as the rats' gaping jaws drew near. There was nowhere left to go. Another step would send them plummeting into the water below. They tightly closed their eyes as they felt the rats' hot breath upon them. Crack! The weight of the rat broke the branch, causing them all to fall into the rushing water. Kahuli and Ha'oli clung desperately to the branch as it drifted downstream. Meanwhile, the rat, unable to fight the rushing current, sank to its watery grave. Now that was close, Ha'oli said as they floated downstream. Well, that's life in Ohi'a Valley. It's nothing like that back home, Kahuli remarked. We don't have anything like rats or cannibal snails. And you better hope they never get there. They've caused a lot of damage to our valley. Because they didn't belong, Kahuli added, slowly beginning to understand. That's right, Kahuli, and that's why you have to get home. That's fine with me. I've had enough excitement for today. Well, our troubles are behind us. It'll be smooth sailing from here on out, Ha'oli reassured him as he laid back for a nap. Just then, they heard a rumbling sound in the distance. What's that? Kahuli asked. Don't worry, it's probably nothing, Ha'oli replied. They seemed to be getting closer. Kahuli began to feel uneasy as their branch picked up speed. Before they knew it, the stream turned into a waterfall. The branch flew off the cliff's edge, hurtling them into the air. They screamed as they fell through the mist, finally plunging into the tumbling water. They held their breath and struggled to reach the surface, but the current was too strong. Soon their air would run out. They feared the worst. Before they realized it, something swam under them. It was an Opu who lived in the mountain stream. Hold on, the Opu called out as he leapt to the surface with Kahuli and Ha'oli on his back, gasping for air. We can't thank you enough, Ha'oli said gratefully as they were brought to safety. It was my pleasure, the Opu replied with a smile. Then, with a friendly wave of his tail, he dove back under the water. On land, Ha'oli looked for a nice spot to dry off and relax. Let's rest on this hapupu fern, he said as they stretched out to feel the sun's warm rays. Is your valley named after this fern? Kahuli asked, admiring the delicately curled leaves. It sure is. Our valley used to be filled with them. Everywhere you looked, you would find lush green hapupu ferns. Ha'oli looked at the devastated forest around him and sighed. Now, there's only a few left in our entire valley. What happened to them? Kahuli wondered. They were destroyed by pigs, Ha'oli said in disgust. Those pigs are the worst. Since they came here, they've caused all kinds of damage to our forest. Our valley would never be in this terrible state if it weren't for those big, fat, ugly pigs. Who are you calling ugly? Bellowed a huge, ferocious pig hovering over them. We'll see who's ugly when I get through with you. The pig dug his powerful tusks into the ground, uprooting the fern with a single sweep. The force sent Kahuli and Ha'oli flying into the air. They landed near a withering ohia tree and quickly climbed to the top. We'll be safe up here, Ha'oli said, trying to catch his breath. Without a warning, they felt, boom! The tree shook beneath them. Kahuli looked down to see the pig charging the base of the tree. Boom! The pig continued to strike with full force, each crash loosening the tree's roots. Kahuli knew the tree could only withstand a few more hits before toppling to the ground. This time there seemed to be no escape. What are we going to do now? He asked. I don't know, Ha'oli replied, but I'll think of something. Just then, above them, Ha'oli saw a great pueo fly by. That's it, he shouted, quickly spinning a web to make a lasso. Hold on, Kahuli. With not a second to spare, he threw his lasso into the air. It barely caught onto the pueo's foot. Below, the pig continued to charge. Boom! One final blow sent the tree crashing to the ground, just as Ha'oli and Kahuli were lifted into the sky. Look at the view, Ha'oli exclaimed as the pueo soared higher. Kahuli looked down and was reminded of his earlier fall. I would really like to go home now, he said as he clung tightly to the silken web. Hey, maybe the pueo can help us. Excuse me, Miss Pueo, he called out from below. Why, hello, the pueo replied, a bit surprised. What are you two doing down there? We're catching a ride, if you don't mind, and my friend here needs to get home to the great ohia tree in Ohia Valley. Would you mind taking us there? Why, I'd be happy to, the pueo said as she spread her powerful wings and headed for Kahuli's homeland. As they flew over the mountains and valleys, Kahuli saw sights he had never seen before. All his life, he had dreamed of seeing the world, and now his dream had finally come true. When they flew into Ohi'a Valley, Kahuli was surprised to find that of all the sights he saw, the most spectacular was that of his own home. Everything he had once taken for granted, he now appreciated and cherished. He was especially happy to see the great ohia tree, standing proudly in the middle of the valley, as it had for centuries. The pueo landed on the great ohia tree, and Kau'i and Ha'oli said their goodbyes. Are you sure you can't stay? Kahuli asked hopefully. You know the rules, Ha'oli replied. I know, Kahuli continued as he climbed down onto the treetop. Everything must stay where they belong. That's right, Kahuli. Never forget that. The pueo once again spread her great wings and carried Ha'oli off into the sky. Kahuli watched sadly as they disappeared behind the mountains. He would miss his new friend, and yet he was happy to know that they would both be home where they belonged. And as far as Kahuli was concerned, there was nowhere else he would rather be than in the great ohia tree. The end.